My wife and her sisters thought it was funny to cancel my train as a prank and leave Epsilon stranded at the station. They laughed thinking I'd forgive them like always, but this time I quietly canceled every bit of financial support they depended on. The silence after was priceless. You know what's worse than being the butt of a joke? Being the butt of a joke orchestrated by the three people who are supposed to have your back. But hey, welcome to my life, where apparently I'm starring in some twisted sitcom called Let's Screw Over the Guy Who Pays for Everything. So there I was, standing at Union Station like some kind of discount businessman, clutching my leather suitcase. The one Clara bought me for Christmas 3 years ago, probably with my own credit card, now that I think about it. The morning sun was doing that annoying thing where it streams through the glass ceiling and makes everything look all cinematic and hopeful. Real cute, universe. Thanks for the mood lighting for my public humiliation. Clara was practically vibrating with barely contained giggles, which should have been my first red flag. My wife doesn't giggle unless she's either drunk on wine or plotting something that's going to cost me money or dignity. Today, apparently, it was the latter. Sophie, her younger sister and professional pain in my ass, had her iPhone out and angled like she was about to film the next viral TikTok. Because nothing says family bonding like recording your brother-in-law's moment of confusion for the internet, right? Careful, don't trip. Sophie called out with that special brand of fake concern that only comes from people who peaked in high school and never quite recovered. She was holding that phone steadier than a surgeon, which was impressive considering she usually can't hold down a job for more than 6 months. But hey, priorities. Mariah, the middle sister and reigning queen of passive-aggressive comments, decided to chime in with her trademark subtlety. Imagine his face when he finds out his ticket isn't valid. She said it just loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough to maintain that thin veneer of plausible deniability that these three had perfected over the years. It's like they went to some secret school for emotional manipulation and graduated summa cum laude. That's when Clara lost it completely. She laughed so loud that half the station turned to look at us, and I swear to God, it sounded like she was auditioning for a laugh track. You know the kind, that obnoxious, over-the-top cackling that makes you want to change the channel even when you're not watching TV. If Netflix had been scouting for new comedy talent right there in the station, they probably would have signed her on the spot. Clara Stevens, professional husband humiliator. And me? I just stood there like the world's most gullible extra in their little production. The guy who shows up to set, follows directions, and somehow never gets told what movie he's actually in. I had my boarding pass in one hand, my phone in the other, checking and double-checking the departure time because, God forbid, I might actually be late to a client meeting that could help pay for Sophie's next emergency or Mariah's kid's latest urgent needs. The station was buzzing with that typical rush hour energy. Business people power walking past me like they were late for million-dollar deals, college kids dragging suitcases that looked like they'd survived a war, elderly couples moving at their own pace, while everyone else flowed around them like water. Normal people doing normal things, completely oblivious to the fact that they were witnessing what would probably go down as the most elaborate prank in Stephen's family history. But then, plot twist worthy of M. Night Shyamalan, the departure board started its little electronic dance. You know the one, where all the letters flip and change like some kind of digital slot machine. And there it was, clear as day. Cancelled. Not delayed. Not running late. Fucking cancelled. Now, here's where a reasonable person might think, wow, what terrible timing. What are the odds? But see, I've been married to Clara for 8 years, which means I've developed a sixth sense for when the universe is conspiring against me versus when my own family is. And brother, this wasn't fate having a laugh at my expense. This was their brilliant prank coming to its grand finale. The beauty of their plan was becoming crystal clear. They knew the train was going to be canceled. They probably checked the website, maybe even called to confirm. They orchestrated this whole thing just to watch me stand there like an idiot, holding a ticket to nowhere, while they filmed it for posterity. Because nothing says loving family like setting up your primary breadwinner for maximum embarrassment in a public place. Everyone around me was dealing with the cancellation in their own ways. Some people were already on their phones, rebooking or calling Ubers. Others were heading to the customer service desk, which was about to turn into a war zone of disappointed travelers. A few were just standing there staring at the board like it might change its mind if they looked hard enough. But me? I got to be the star of their little show. The husband who got punked by his own wife and her sisters. The guy who was so trusting, so goddamn naive, that he actually believed his family when they said they were just being supportive by coming to see him off. If humiliation was an Olympic sport, I swear these three would be standing on that podium with gold medals around their necks, probably taking selfies while the national anthem played. Clara would be giving interviews about her technique. Sophie would already be posting highlights on Instagram with captions like, "Family pranks hit different." And Mariah would be writing a LinkedIn post about creative problem-solving in relationships. As I stood there, watching the last of my fellow travelers disperse to find alternative transportation or refunds, one thought kept running through my head. When did I become the punchline in my own life? When did the guy who works 60-hour weeks to keep everyone else comfortable become the entertainment for their Tuesday morning? The station was starting to empty out, but their laughter was still echoing off the walls like some kind of twisted soundtrack. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a fake train ticket or a canceled meeting. This was about years of being treated like the family ATM with legs, the guy who exists purely for their convenience and amusement. Well, ladies, I hope you enjoyed the show, because something tells me this might be the last time I play the fool in your little comedy routine. Standing there with my suitcase handle cutting into my palm, I couldn't help but take a little trip down memory lane. And let me tell you, it wasn't exactly a scenic route through happier times. More like a guided tour through greatest hits of financial exploitation, featuring yours truly as the star sucker. Let's start with Clara's credit card debt, shall we? Picture this. I come home from a 12-hour day at the office, ready to collapse face first into a bowl of cereal for dinner, when my loving wife hits me with the news. "Honey," she said, in that voice that's sweeter than artificial sweetener and twice as fake. "We need to talk about something small." Small, right? Like the Titanic had a small leak. Turns out, my darling wife had racked up $23,000 in debt. 23 fucking thousand. On what, you ask? Well, according to her itemized breakdown, which she presented like she was giving a PowerPoint at a Fortune 500 company, it was essential purchases for our lifestyle. Essential. Like the $800 handbag that she used exactly twice before it went to live in our closet with all its expensive, neglected friends. Or the investment pieces from Nordstrom that were apparently going to revolutionize her wardrobe and, by extension, our entire lives. But here's my favorite part. When I asked how she managed to hide 23 grand in debt from me, she looked at me like I was the crazy one. "I wasn't hiding it," she said. "I was protecting you from unnecessary stress." Protecting me. How thoughtful of her to protect me from the minor detail that we were financially fucked. So who bailed her out? If you guessed, the guy currently standing in a train station feeling like an ass. Congratulations, you win absolutely nothing, which coincidentally is exactly what I got for my trouble. I liquidated part of my 401k, took out a personal loan, and basically turned our financial stability into Swiss cheese. But hey, Clara got to keep her credit score intact, which was apparently more important than my retirement fund. Then there's Mariah, the middle sister and professional victim of circumstances that are somehow always beyond her control. Remember when she forgot to pay her car loan for 6 months straight? Not 6 days, not 6 weeks, 6 fucking months. How do you forget something like that? It's not like losing your keys or forgetting to buy milk. It's a monthly payment that keeps your transportation from getting repossessed. But according to Mariah, it wasn't her fault. Oh no, it was a complicated web of miscommunication, billing errors, and what she called financial overwhelm. Financial overwhelm. I love how people create fancy terms for, "I spent my car payment money on other shit." She had money for her weekly Monty Python, money for her kids' designer sneakers, money for girls' nights out. But somehow the $387 car payment just slipped through the cracks of her overwhelmed mind. Guess who got the panicked phone call at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday? "They're going to repo my car today." She sobbed into the phone like someone had died. "The kids need to get to school. I can't lose my car. You have to help me." Not "can you help me?" or "would it be possible to help me?" I had to help her. Like it was written in some cosmic contract that I'd apparently signed without reading the fine print. So there I was, on the phone with some loan company, negotiating a payment plan for my sister-in-law's car while she sat in her kitchen drinking a latte that probably cost more than most people's lunch. I ended up paying 4 months' worth of payments up front, nearly $1,500, just to get them off her back. And her gratitude? A text message that said, "You're the best. I owe you big time." Spoiler alert, I'm still waiting for that big time payback, and it's been 2 years. But Sophie, oh sweet Sophie, she really takes the cake. The youngest sister and hands-down winner of the Most Creative Reasons to Need Money award. Remember her dental surgery? The one that was supposedly going to fix her deviated bite and improve her quality of life. Turns out, what she really meant was she wanted veneers because her Instagram photos weren't getting enough likes. Dental surgery. She made it sound like she needed life-saving medical intervention, when what she actually wanted was a Hollywood smile to go with her Hollywood dreams of becoming an influencer. Because apparently, having a regular job is for suckers, and the path to financial independence runs through TikTok sponsorships and teeth that glow in the dark. The cost? $8,000. $8,000 for what amounted to cosmetic dentistry, so she could take better selfies. And when her insurance, shocking absolutely no one, didn't cover her vanity project, guess whose phone started ringing? That's right, the family bank account with legs. It's not just about looks, she insisted when I questioned the necessity of spending mortgage payment money on her teeth. This is about my self-confidence and my future career prospects. Her future career prospects. The girl who quit her last 3 jobs because they didn't align with her creative vision was suddenly worried about career prospects. But here's the kicker, and this is what really gets me every time I think about it. They all had the same line. Every single one of them. Clara with her credit cards, Mariah with her car payments, Sophie with her dental work. They all said the exact same thing. You're just so dependable. Dependable. They made it sound like a compliment, like being dependable was this wonderful character trait that I should be proud of. But what they really meant was, you're a pushover who always says yes when we need money. I wasn't dependable. I was a doormat. A doormat with a decent credit score and a steady paycheck, but a doormat nonetheless. And the worst part? I let it happen. For years, I convinced myself that this was what family did for each other. That being the provider meant being the solution to everyone else's problems, financial or otherwise. I told myself that their appreciation, their gratitude, their promises to pay me back someday were enough. But standing in that train station, listening to their laughter echoing off the walls while I held a ticket to nowhere, something finally clicked. This wasn't family looking out for each other. This was 3 grown women who had figured out that they could treat me like their personal ATM, and I'd just keep dispensing cash with a smile. Well, ladies, the bank is about to close for renovations. You know that moment when your phone buzzes and you just know, without even looking, that whatever's about to appear on your screen is going to piss you off. That little vibration that feels less like a notification and more like a warning shot across the bow of your already sinking ship? Yeah, that was the exact feeling I got standing there in the station, still processing the fact that my own wife had just turned me into the star of her personal comedy special. The phone screen lit up with Clara's name, and honestly, I should have just chucked the damn thing into the nearest trash can and called it a day. But no, like the glutton for punishment that I apparently am, I swiped to read her message. And boy, did she deliver exactly what I expected, wrapped up in that special brand of condescending bullshit that she'd perfected over our 8 years of marriage. Relax, babe, it's just a prank. Don't be sensitive. We'll laugh about it later. Relax. Don't be sensitive. We'll laugh about it later. Let me break this down for you, because this text message was basically a masterclass in gaslighting disguised as an apology that wasn't actually an apology at all. First up, relax, babe. Because nothing says, I respect your feelings, like immediately dismissing them and telling you to chill out. It's the grown-up equivalent of calm down, which, as everyone knows, has never in the history of human communication actually made anyone calm down. If anything, being told to relax when you're already pissed off is like throwing gasoline on a fire and then acting surprised when the whole thing goes up in flames. But the babe part? That's the cherry on top. She's trying to soften the blow with a pet name. Like I'm some kind of golden retriever who's going to forget why I'm upset if she just uses the right tone of voice. Oh, she called me babe. Clearly she loves me, and this public humiliation was just an expression of her deep affection. Then we've got, it's just a prank, which is probably the most infuriating 3 words in the English language when strung together. It's the universal get-out-of-jail-free card for people who want to be assholes without facing any consequences. I didn't emotionally manipulate you and waste your time. It was just a prank. It's like the adult version of "I'm not touching you" while hovering your finger an inch from someone's face. Just a prank. Like my time doesn't matter. Like my trust doesn't matter. Like the fact that I'd rearranged my entire schedule, prepared for an important client meeting, and showed up at the station in good faith was all just collateral damage in their little comedy routine. Just a prank, as if the fact that it was planned and deliberate somehow makes it better instead of infinitely worse. But here's where Clara really showed her true colors. Don't be sensitive. Holy shit. If that isn't the battle cry of every person who's ever done something shitty and then tried to make it the victim's fault for having feelings about it. Don't be sensitive. Don't have emotions. Don't expect basic respect from the people who are supposed to love you. Just shut up, take it, and pretend like being treated like garbage is somehow character building. You know what's sensitive? Expecting your wife not to set you up for public embarrassment. Thinking that maybe, just maybe, the person you married might have your back instead of conspiring against you with her sisters. Believing that your feelings matter enough for someone to consider them before orchestrating an elaborate scheme to make you look like an idiot. Apparently, all of that makes me sensitive. And finally, the piece de resistance. We'll laugh about it later. We'll laugh. Not, I hope you can laugh about it someday. Or, maybe this will be funny in hindsight. No, she's already decided that this is going to be hilarious for everyone involved, including me. Because apparently, I don't get a say in how I feel about being the butt of their joke. But here's the thing about that little word "we." It implies that I'm part of their little club. That I'm in on the joke instead of being the punchline. That somehow, this humiliating experience is going to bring us all closer together, like we're characters in some heartwarming family sitcom where misunderstandings lead to group hugs and valuable life lessons. Translation, we'll laugh. You'll pay. Because that's how it always worked in the Stevens family dynamic. They gotta have their fun, and I gotta foot the bill. Emotionally, financially, or both. They created the chaos, and I cleaned up the mess. They told the jokes, and I played the fool. Then everyone moved on like nothing happened until the next time they needed entertainment or money, whichever came first. I must have read that text message 15 times, each time feeling a different flavor of rage. First, it was the hot, immediate anger of being dismissed. Then came the cold realization of how little respect she actually had for me. After that was the crushing disappointment of understanding that this pattern was never going to change unless I changed it. But you know what the really fucked up part was? For about 30 seconds, I actually considered doing exactly what she expected. I caught myself thinking about how I could just laugh it off, call an Uber, head home, and pretend like this was all just harmless fun. I could picture myself walking through the front door, shaking my head with a rueful smile, saying something like, "You really got me good," while they high-fived each other for their brilliant execution. That's how deeply the pattern was ingrained. Even after being publicly humiliated, even while standing there feeling like the biggest sucker in the tri-state area, my first instinct was still to make it easy for them. To be the good sport. To be dependable old me who rolls with the punches and never makes waves. Normally, that's exactly what would have happened. I'd sigh that long-suffering sigh that I'd perfected over the years, call an Uber, and let the whole thing slide into the ever-growing pile of things we don't talk about that seemed to define my relationship with Clara and her sisters. I'd go home, maybe make a few half-hearted jokes about how they got me good, and then life would continue exactly as it always had. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the way that businessman had looked at me with pity when he walked past. Maybe it was the sound of their laughter still echoing in my ears. Or maybe it was just the cumulative weight of 8 years' worth of being treated like the family doormat finally reaching its breaking point. Whatever it was, something inside me snapped. And I don't mean snapped like a twig. I mean snapped like a cheap phone charger that you've bent one too many times until the wires finally give up and refuse to work anymore. Standing there in that train station, surrounded by the normal chaos of people living their normal lives, I had what you might call a moment of clarity. The kind of moment where everything suddenly makes perfect sense and you realize you've been living your life completely wrong. The joke was about to backfire in ways they never saw coming. You know that feeling when you're about to do something that you know is going to change everything? That moment when your thumb is hovering over the nuclear button and you're thinking, well, this is either going to be the best decision I've ever made or I'm about to blow up my entire life. That's exactly where I found myself, standing in Union Station with my phone in my hand and my banking app loaded up like I was about to launch a fucking missile. The Chase mobile app had never looked so beautiful. There it was, glowing on my screen like some kind of digital sword of justice, ready to cut through 8 years of financial bullshit with the precision of a surgeon and the satisfaction of a man who'd finally found his backbone. Every account, every card, every automated transfer that had been slowly bleeding me dry for years. All of it was right there, waiting for me to take control. Let me paint you a picture of what my financial life had looked like up until this moment. It was like being connected to 3 human leeches through a complex network of tubes, constantly draining my bank account to keep their lifestyle habits fed and happy. There were recurring transfers that I'd set up so long ago I'd forgotten they existed. Monthly allowances that had somehow become sacred obligations. Shared credit cards that were supposed to be for emergencies, but seemed to have a very loose definition of what constituted an emergency. First up was Clara's monthly allowance. And yes, I'm using air quotes because that's exactly how ridiculous it sounds. $800 a month, automatically transferred to her personal account, so she could maintain what she called her financial independence. Financial independence. Right. Because nothing says independence like having your husband automatically deposit money into your account every month like you're his sugar baby instead of his wife. But here's the kicker. She never asked for this arrangement. I suggested it. Yeah, you read that right. I was the genius who thought it would be a good idea to give my wife an allowance like she was a teenager who needed lunch money. I thought I was being considerate, giving her freedom to spend money without having to run every purchase by me. What I actually did was create a system where she never had to think about money at all, because good old dependable me would just keep the cash flowing like a broken ATM. Tap. Transfer canceled. $800 a month gone. Just like that. Next on the chopping block was the shared credit card that all 3 sisters had access to. The family emergencies card that was supposed to be used for things like medical bills or car repairs, but somehow kept getting charged for things like girls' nights out, shopping sprees, and Sophie's endless stream of essential beauty treatments. The balance on that card was sitting at a cool 12 grand, and I was the only one making payments on it. Here's a fun game. Guess how many actual emergencies that card had been used for in the past 2 years. If you guessed 0, congratulations. You understand the Stevens family better than I did for most of my marriage. Every charge was either pure luxury or something that could have waited, but somehow everything became an emergency when you're not the one paying the bill. Tap. Card frozen. Account restricted. No more emergency brunches, ladies. But wait, there's more. Because why stop at credit cards when you can also cancel the automatic payments for things like Mariah's gym membership, Sophie's car insurance, and that Netflix family plan that seemed to exist solely so they could binge-watch shows while I worked overtime to pay for their entertainment. The gym membership was particularly galling. Mariah had convinced me that paying for her gym was an investment in family health, because apparently, she was going to get so fit and healthy that it would somehow benefit me too. $59 a month for a membership she used maybe twice. I know this because the gym sends usage reports, and let me tell you, seeing that you're paying $60 a month for someone to occasionally walk past a treadmill is a special kind of torture. Tap. Cancelled. Mariah can do jumping jacks in her living room like the rest of us. Sophie's car insurance was another beauty. Somehow, it had become my responsibility to make sure my sister-in-law's car was covered because she forgot to set up automatic payments and kept getting cancellation notices. So rather than deal with the drama of her potentially driving uninsured, I just added it to my list of monthly obligations. $123 a month to insure a car that I never got to drive, owned by someone who never thanked me for keeping her legal on the road. Tap. Gone. Sophie can figure out how to adult like everybody else. And the Netflix account? Don't even get me started. What was supposed to be a family plan had somehow turned into a streaming service for half the neighborhood. Clara had given the password to her sisters, who had given it to their friends, who had probably given it to their friends. I was paying for a premium subscription so that people I'd never met could watch shows I'd never heard of. But here's what really made this moment beautiful. Every single tap felt like poetry. Not the flowery, romantic kind of poetry that makes you think about sunsets and eternal love. No, This was more like the kind of poetry that comes from finally telling your boss exactly what you think about his management style, or the satisfaction of hanging up on a telemarketer mid-pitch. Each canceled payment was a verse in my personal epic of financial liberation. Every frozen card was a stanza in the ballad of "Fuck this, I'm done." The rhythm of my thumb hitting that screen was like applause for the man I was finally becoming instead of the doormat I'd been for way too long. I could picture it all so clearly. Mariah pulling up to the gas station in her SUV, sliding her card into the reader with that casual confidence of someone who'd never worried about where the money came from. The little screen would flash "declined," and she'd probably assume it was some kind of technical error. She'd try it again, maybe clean the chip with her shirt, try a different pump. But nope, declined, declined, declined. Sophie at Starbucks, ordering her daily $8 latte with extra everything and a side of attitude, completely oblivious to the fact that her sugar daddy had just cut off the supply. The barista would hand her the card reader. She'd tap her phone expecting that satisfying little beep, and instead get nothing but digital silence. "Sorry, ma'am, your payment didn't go through." And Clara, oh, sweet Clara, the queen of this whole operation, trying to order sushi for another one of their girls' nights, where they'd sit around talking about how hard their lives were while eating $40 worth of raw fish that I was paying for. She'd be on her phone, probably already planning what ridiculous story they'd tell about my overreaction at the station, when suddenly her card would get declined faster than a bad pickup line at a feminist rally. The beautiful thing about modern banking is how immediate everything is. There's no grace period, no "we'll try again in a few hours." When you freeze an account, it's frozen immediately. When you cancel a recurring payment, it's gone instantly. No takebacks, no cooling off period, no "are you sure you want to do this?" Just pure, immediate, satisfying justice served up digitally. The loudspeaker crackled to life with that tinny, mechanical voice that every train station seems to have contracted from the same company that specializes in making important announcements sound like they're being delivered by a robot with a head cold. Next train departing in 10 minutes. All aboard for Philadelphia, with stops in Trenton and Princeton Junction. Philadelphia? Huh. I hadn't even thought about where I wanted to go. I'd been so focused on where I was leaving from. But Philly sounded perfect right about now. The city of brotherly love, where I could get some peace and quiet away from the sisterly hate that had been masquerading as family affection for the better part of a decade. I caught my reflection in the glass doors that led to the platform, and for the first time in I don't know how long, I actually looked at myself instead of just glancing past like I was late for something more important. The guy staring back at me didn't look like the usual frazzled mess who was always checking his phone for the next crisis text or calculating how much someone else's emergency was going to cost him. No, this guy looked calm, centered, even, like he'd just figured out the answer to a question that had been bugging him for years. His shoulders weren't hunched up around his ears from stress. His jaw wasn't clenched from trying not to say what he really thought. For once in his adult life, he looked like a man who wasn't in customer service mode. You know what I mean by customer service mode, right? That perpetual state of being ready to solve someone else's problem, fix someone else's mistake, or absorb someone else's bad mood while maintaining a smile that says, "Your convenience is my top priority." I'd been stuck in that mode for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist without constantly scanning for the next person who needed something from me. But standing there in that station, having just systematically dismantled the financial infrastructure of their lifestyle, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the complete absence of obligation to anyone but myself. It was like taking off shoes that had been too tight for so long that you'd forgotten your feet could actually feel comfortable. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sophie. "Bet you're pouting. Want us to pick you up? Say sorry first. Say sorry first." The audacity was almost impressive. They orchestrate an elaborate prank designed to humiliate me in public, and then they want me to apologize for not being a good enough sport about it. It's like getting punched in the face and then being asked to thank the person for the free dental work. I actually laughed out loud. Not the polite chuckle you give when someone tells a joke that isn't funny, or the nervous laugh you use to defuse tension when things get awkward. This was a genuine, from-the-belly laugh of someone who'd just heard the most ridiculous thing imaginable. A couple of other passengers waiting for the train looked at me like I might be losing my shit, which, to be fair, I probably was. But it was the good kind of losing your shit, the kind that happens when you finally see how insane your normal really was. Sure, I muttered to myself, loud enough that a businesswoman with a rolling suitcase gave me some side-eye. I'll say sorry. Sorry your cards don't work. Sorry you're about to learn what consequences feel like. Sorry I waited this long to grow a spine. The train pulled into the station with that satisfying rumble that you feel in your chest before you hear it with your ears. It was one of those newer models, clean, efficient, the kind of train that actually runs on schedule because it hasn't been subjected to years of deferred maintenance and bureaucratic incompetence. Kind of like how I felt about myself in that moment, finally operating the way I was supposed to after years of running on fumes and good intentions. I found a window seat about halfway down the car, which was perfect because it gave me a clear view of the platform as we pulled away. There was something deeply satisfying about watching Union Station shrink in the distance, taking all the drama and manipulation with it. Every mile of track between me and them felt like another layer of their bullshit being peeled away. The rhythm of the train was hypnotic, that steady clickety-clack that sounds like applause if you're in the right frame of mind. And brother, I was definitely in the right frame of mind. Each click of the wheels on the track sounded like validation. Clickety-clack, you did good. Clickety-clack, about damn time. Clickety-clack, welcome to your new life. I'd forgotten how much I actually enjoyed train travel when it wasn't tied to some obligation or someone else's agenda. There's something honest about it. You get on, you sit down, and you go where the train is going. No GPS rerouting you through traffic. No Uber driver trying to make conversation about the weather. No flight delays or cancellations, or the general nightmare that air travel has become. Just you, a seat, and the landscape rolling by at exactly the speed it's supposed to. The conductor came through to check tickets, and for a split second, I had this moment of panic. What if my ticket really wasn't valid? What if this was all part of some elaborate extended prank, and I was about to get kicked off the train in front of a car full of strangers? But no, my ticket was beautiful, clean, legitimate, properly purchased, and completely valid. The conductor barely glanced at it before moving on to the next passenger, but to me, that little interaction felt like the most normal thing that had happened to me in months. Just a simple transaction between two people who didn't have hidden agendas or ulterior motives. He checked my ticket, I was good to go, end of story. No drama, no strings attached, no one asking for anything extra. It was refreshing in the way that a cold beer is refreshing after you've been working in the yard all day. Simple, straightforward, exactly what you needed without any complications. The train started picking up speed as we left the city limits, and I watched the urban landscape give way to suburbs, then to patches of trees and open space. Each mile marker we passed felt like another small victory. Mile 15, I haven't checked my phone in 20 minutes. Mile 22, nobody has asked me for anything. Mile 31, this seat belongs to me and nobody else has a claim on it. My phone was still in my pocket, probably collecting more increasingly frantic messages from the Three Stooges as they slowly realized that their little prank had backfired in ways they never saw coming. But for the first time in years, I wasn't feeling that compulsive need to check it every 30 seconds. Whatever chaos was unfolding back home could unfold without my immediate attention. The landscape outside my window was ordinary: office parks, strip malls, the occasional residential neighborhood, but it looked different somehow. Like I was seeing it through new eyes instead of the stressed-out, obligation-filled filter I'd been using for the past 8 years. Everything looked cleaner, more peaceful, full of possibility instead of problems. For once in my adult life, I was the only person on my to-do list. Halfway down the line, somewhere between watching a suburban McDonald's blur past my window and realizing that I hadn't thought about work emails in over an hour, my phone started having what I can only describe as a full-blown electronic seizure. The thing was buzzing, pinging, and lighting up like a goddamn slot machine that had just hit the jackpot. Except in this case, the jackpot was my family's slowly dawning realization that their personal ATM had just gone permanently out of order. The first notification was from my bank's mobile app. Card ending in 4857 was declined for a transaction of $47.82 at Morton's Mortgage Services. Ah, Morton's. Clara's favorite place to pretend she was a sophisticated businesswoman having power lunches, when what she was actually doing was eating overpriced steak on my dime, while complaining about how hard her life was to whoever would listen. The second ping came about 30 seconds later. Card ending in 4857 was declined for a transaction of $127.50 at Target. That would be Sophie, trying to buy whatever the hell 20-something influencer wannabes buy at Target these days. Probably ring lights for her TikTok videos about how hard it is to be beautiful, or some kind of organizational system for the makeup collection that she never uses but absolutely had to have. Then came the text avalanche. Clara, honey, mortgage payment bounced. The question mark was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, like she genuinely couldn't fathom how such a thing could possibly happen. As if mortgage payments just bounce sometimes, like checks written on accounts filled with hopes and dreams instead of actual money. Sophie was next. Bro, my card declined at Target. Did you move the money? Did I move the money? Like it was my money that had somehow wandered off on its own, gotten lost, and needed to be rounded up and brought back home. Not, did you cut off my access to your money? Or did you stop subsidizing my shopping addiction? But did you move the money like I was some kind of incompetent accountant who'd misplaced a decimal point? Mariah's contribution to the chaos was equally precious. Rent didn't clear. Not cool. Not cool. That's how she chose to express her displeasure with the fact that I was no longer paying her rent for her. Not, thank you for covering my rent for the past year. Or, I understand why you might be upset, but not cool. Like I was the asshole for expecting a grown woman with 2 kids to pay her own bills. I settled back into my seat, fishing out the world's most pathetic cup of coffee from the station vending machine. You know the kind, where the coffee is somehow both too hot and too cold at the same time, and tastes like it was brewed using water that had been filtered through gym socks. But in that moment, sipping that terrible coffee while watching my phone light up with the beautiful symphony of financial consequences, it tasted like victory. There's something deeply satisfying about watching people face the natural results of their actions for the first time in years. It's like watching a nature documentary where the gazelle finally stops running and turns around to face the lion. Except in this case, I was both the gazelle and the lion, and the ecosystem was my bank account. The conductor had checked my ticket earlier, clean, legitimate, properly purchased with my own money for my own trip that I had planned for my own reasons. Meanwhile, back in the chaos I was leaving behind, they were discovering what it felt like to have tickets that didn't work, cards that didn't swipe, and payments that didn't process. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it for dinner. My phone kept buzzing. Another decline notification. Card ending in 3291 was declined for a transaction of $89.73 at Shell gas station. That would be Mariah. Discovering that her gas card, which was actually my gas card that I'd given her access to, was no longer accepting her attempts to fill up her SUV. The same SUV that got about 12 miles to the gallon and was probably sitting at the pump right now while she frantically called the number on the back of the card, convinced there must be some kind of mistake. Then came another text from Clara. The Netflix isn't working either. What's going on? What's going on? Like this was some kind of mysterious technical glitch that had simultaneously affected multiple unrelated financial systems. Like there was some kind of cosmic convergence that had caused all of their payment methods to stop working at exactly the same time, completely unrelated to any deliberate action on my part. I could picture the scene so clearly it was like watching a movie. Clara standing in our kitchen, well, my kitchen, since I'm the one who pays the mortgage, frantically trying to log into Netflix only to discover that the account had been downgraded to the basic plan that only allows one screen at a time. Sophie somewhere across town, probably live streaming her morning routine to her 7 followers, suddenly discovering that her Target haul was going to have to wait. Mariah sitting in her car at the gas station, staring at the pump like it had personally betrayed her. The beautiful thing about modern payment processing is how immediate and unforgiving it is. There's no grace period where transactions get approved with a gentle reminder to update your payment information. There's no friendly customer service representative calling to ask if maybe you just forgot to transfer money from savings. It's just immediate, digital rejection. Declined. Insufficient funds. Transaction cannot be processed. The cold, mechanical voice of reality finally speaking up after years of being silenced by my misguided generosity. Another ping. Card ending in 4857 was declined for a transaction of $23.45 at Dunkin'. Sophie again, probably trying to buy her daily iced coffee with enough sugar to fuel a small aircraft. I could almost hear her explaining to the teenager behind the counter that there must be some mistake, that her card always works, that she's never had this problem before. The train was picking up speed now, and so was the frequency of my notifications. It was like watching dominoes fall, except each domino was a financial reality check that was about 3 years overdue. Every declined transaction was a small celebration. Every bounced payment was a tiny victory party for the part of me that had been screaming silently for years. My coffee was getting cold, but I didn't care. I was too busy enjoying the sweet music of consequences finally catching up with people who thought they were immune to them. The rhythm of the train wheels on the tracks was keeping perfect time with the symphony of decline notifications, creating a soundtrack for my liberation that no streaming service could provide. For once in my life, their chaos wasn't my emergency. Their problems weren't automatically my problems. Their poor planning wasn't my responsibility to fix. I was just a guy on a train, drinking terrible coffee and watching the landscape roll by while his phone played the most beautiful song he'd ever heard. The sound of 3 grown women finally learning that money doesn't grow on trees, even when those trees are named after their sister's husband. The Comfort Inn near 30th Street Station in Philadelphia wasn't exactly the Ritz-Carlton, but let me tell you something. When you're checking into a place with your own money, for your own reasons, without having to justify the expense to anyone else, even a budget hotel feels like a goddamn palace. The lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and the dreams of traveling salesmen. But it was mine for the night, and that made all the difference. The desk clerk was a kid who looked like he was maybe 19 and probably studying business at Temple while working nights to pay for textbooks that cost more than most people's car payments. He had that eager, customer service smile that hadn't been beaten down by years of dealing with entitled assholes who think hotel employees exist solely to absorb their travel frustrations. "Just the one night?" he asked, fingers flying over the keyboard with the efficiency of someone who'd checked in approximately 10,000 guests and could probably do it in his sleep. "Just one night," I confirmed, and the words felt strange coming out of my mouth. When was the last time I'd made a decision about my own schedule without having to run it past a committee of 3 women who always seemed to have opinions about how I should be spending my time? When was the last time I'd gone somewhere just because I wanted to, not because someone else needed me to be there? The room was on the 3rd floor, which meant a ride in an elevator that had seen better decades and made noises like it was personally offended by the concept of vertical transportation. But when those doors opened and I stepped into the hallway with its predictable beige carpet and fluorescent lighting that flickered just enough to make you question your life choices, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete and total ownership of my immediate future. Room 312 was a masterpiece of budget hotel design. Everything was brown or beige or some color that existed somewhere in the neutral zone between brown and beige. The carpet looked like it had been specifically chosen for its ability to hide stains, which was probably a wise business decision in a place where people ate takeout Chinese food directly over the floor while watching pay-per-view movies they were too embarrassed to rent at home. The bed was one of those queen-size mattresses that had been through more ups and downs than a failed marriage, with sheets that were clean but had that institutional smell that suggested they'd been washed in industrial-strength detergent by someone who took their job seriously but wasn't paid enough to care about thread count. The comforter was a shade of brown that interior designers probably called burnt sienna, but which I preferred to think of as the color of my soul before today. But here's the thing, it was mine. Every ugly, budget-friendly square inch of it belonged to me for the next 12 hours, and nobody else had a claim on it. Clara couldn't redecorate it. Sophie couldn't borrow it for a photo shoot. Mariah couldn't use it as free babysitting while she went out for girls' night. It was just a room, and I was just a guy in that room, and for once in my adult life, the math was that simple. The TV was one of those ancient flat screens that was about as thick as a textbook and had a remote control that looked like it had survived multiple apocalypses. I flipped through the channels, 73 of them, according to the little placard on the nightstand, and marveled at the fact that I could watch whatever I wanted without having to negotiate with anyone about programming choices. No reality shows about people whose biggest problem was deciding which of their 3 vacation homes to renovate. No romantic comedies where the female lead discovers that what she really needed all along was a man to fix her problems. No cooking shows hosted by people who'd never had to figure out how to make dinner for 4 people with $12 and whatever was left in the pantry from last week's grocery run. I settled on a documentary about deep-sea fishing, which was possibly the most boring thing available, and it was perfect. Just guys in boats catching fish, no drama, no manufactured conflict, no one asking anyone else to solve their problems or subsidize their lifestyle choices. Pure, simple, honest work being done by people who understood that if you want something, you have to go out and catch it yourself. My phone was sitting on the nightstand, face down, still buzzing occasionally like an angry wasp trapped in a jar. But for the first time in recent memory, I wasn't feeling that Pavlovian urge to check it immediately. Whatever crisis was unfolding in real time back home could unfold without my immediate intervention. Whatever emergency had suddenly become my responsibility to solve could wait until I decided I was ready to deal with it. The air conditioner was one of those window units that sounded like a freight train having an asthma attack, but it was pumping out cold air with the determination of a machine that had been built during an era when appliances were expected to work for decades instead of becoming obsolete the moment you threw away the warranty card. The noise was actually comforting. White noise that drowned out the sound of traffic from the street below and the voices in my head that kept trying to remind me of all the reasons why I should feel guilty about what I'd done. I lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling tiles that were arranged in that classic drop ceiling pattern that screamed affordable commercial construction. There was a water stain in the corner that looked like either a map of Texas or a portrait of my ex-mother-in-law, depending on how you tilted your head and how generous you were feeling about abstract art. But you know what? That water stain was honest. It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't. It wasn't pretending to be sophisticated or high-end or worthy of admiration. It was just a mark left behind by a plumbing problem that someone had fixed without asking anyone else to pay for it. There was something refreshing about that level of straightforward simplicity. My phone buzzed again, longer this time. Probably a call that I wasn't going to answer. The sound seemed smaller somehow, less urgent, like it was coming from another world where people still believed that my problems were automatically their solutions and their problems were automatically my emergencies. For the first time in years, I was in a space where no one expected anything from me except the $49 plus tax that I'd already paid at the front desk. No hidden agendas, no unspoken obligations, no complex emotional mathematics where every gesture had to be calculated against some running tally of who owed what to whom. Just me, a questionable mattress, the sound of an overworked air conditioner, and the slowly sinking realization that this might be the most peaceful I'd felt since before I said, I do, to a woman who apparently thought marriage was a long-term financial planning strategy, disguised as a romantic commitment. The next morning, I woke up to discover that my phone had transformed overnight into a digital monument to desperation. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 4 voicemails that were probably going to be more entertaining than anything Netflix could offer. The notification screen looked like an emergency alert system for a family that had suddenly realized their safety net wasn't actually attached to anything permanent. I made myself a cup of coffee using one of those single-serve machines that every hotel room has now, the kind that makes coffee that tastes like it was brewed by someone who'd heard a description of coffee once but had never actually tasted it. But even terrible hotel coffee tastes like freedom when you're drinking it, without someone asking you to fix their problems before you've had your first sip. The first voicemail was from Clara, and her voice had that particular quality that every man who's been married for more than 5 minutes learns to recognize. The sound of someone who's realized that their actions have consequences and is now trying to backpedal their way out of reality. Honey, she started, and I could practically hear her practicing this speech in the mirror before she called. We didn't mean it. It was just a joke. You know we love you, right? I mean, obviously we love you. That's why we feel comfortable enough to, have fun with you. It's because we trust you to understand that we were just being playful. Playful. There's a word that's doing more heavy lifting than a powerlifter at the Olympics. Setting someone up for public humiliation is now being playful. Orchestrating an elaborate prank designed to make your husband look like an idiot is apparently just another way of saying, I love you. I wondered what other expressions of affection I'd been missing out on. Maybe identity theft was just their way of showing they cared about my credit score. But Clara wasn't done with her performance. I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. We probably went too far. Okay, we definitely went too far. But you know how Sophie gets when she has an idea, and Mariah just goes along with everything. And I was trying to be supportive of my sisters, you know? The classic, it wasn't really my idea defense. Clara was throwing her sisters under the bus with the skill of someone who'd clearly done this before. Not, I made a choice to participate in humiliating you. But Sophie made me do it, and Mariah peer pressured me, and I'm really just a victim of circumstances beyond my control. The second voicemail was Sophie, and her approach was refreshingly direct in its complete lack of self-awareness. So what? You're punishing us now? Really? Over a stupid prank? Don't forget where you came from, bro. We're family. Family doesn't abandon each other over petty bullshit like this. You're being way too sensitive about this whole thing. Don't forget where I came from. Like I'd somehow forgotten that I'd grown up in a middle-class household where people paid their own bills and took responsibility for their own mistakes. Where family meant supporting each other, not using each other as personal ATMs. Where pranks were actually funny instead of deliberately cruel. But my favorite part was the family doesn't abandon each other line. Because apparently, family is a one-way street where I'm obligated to financially support their lifestyle choices, but they're free to treat me like their personal entertainment whenever they get bored. Family doesn't abandon each other, but family absolutely can strand each other at train stations for laughs. The logic was flawless if you completely ignored logic. The third voicemail was Mariah, and she decided to go full guilt trip with a side of emotional manipulation. The kids are crying. Seriously, they're asking where Uncle Mike is and why Mommy is so upset. How can you do this to family? How can you do this to children who love you? The kids are crying. Of course they are. Because nothing teaches children about healthy relationships like watching their mother use them as emotional weapons against the man who's been subsidizing their lives. I'm sure those kids were absolutely devastated that their uncle had finally stopped letting their mother treat him like a walking wallet. But here's what really got me. How can you do this to family? As if I was the one who'd done something wrong. As if standing up for myself was somehow a betrayal of family values. As if expecting basic respect from the people who are supposed to love you is an unreasonable demand that makes you the villain in your own life story. I almost spit my terrible hotel coffee all over the comforter that had seen better decades. Family. Family doesn't set you up for public humiliation. Family doesn't use your trust as a setup for their entertainment. Family doesn't treat your time, money, and emotions like their community property that exists solely for their benefit. But what really killed me was the phrase, who love you at the end. Because if this is what love looks like, financial exploitation combined with emotional manipulation and a healthy dose of public embarrassment, then I'd rather be single for the rest of my life than experience another moment of their love. I scrolled through the text messages, which were like a masterclass in escalation tactics. Clara had clearly been busy overnight, probably lying awake, crafting the perfect combination of guilt, manipulation, and fake vulnerability to get me back in line. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about how hurt you must be. The house feels so empty without you. I know I messed up. We all messed up. Just come home so we can talk about this like adults. Your coffee mug is still sitting on the counter, and it's making me cry. My coffee mug is making her cry. The same coffee mug that she'd probably never washed, never replaced when it got chipped, never even noticed except when she needed a prop for her guilt-induced performance art. But now, suddenly, it was a symbol of our deep and meaningful connection that was being tragically severed by my unreasonable reaction to being treated like garbage. The text messages from Sophie were shorter, but no less manipulative. This is so stupid. You're acting like a child. Just come home already. Mom wants to know if you're having a midlife crisis. Mom wants to know if I'm having a midlife crisis. Because clearly, the only possible explanation for a man expecting basic respect from his family is some kind of psychological breakdown. Not, my son-in-law finally got tired of being treated like shit, but he must be having a crisis that requires our immediate intervention and probably some kind of medication. And Mariah's texts were a beautiful combination of financial panic and emotional blackmail. Rent is due tomorrow. Kids need groceries. Car payment bounced. You're destroying our lives. This isn't who you are. This isn't who I am. That was my favorite. Because apparently, who I really am is someone who exists solely to solve other people's problems while absorbing their abuse with a smile. The real me is a doormat with a checking account, and any deviation from that programming means I'm having some kind of identity crisis that needs to be corrected immediately. I typed slowly, savoring each word like I was crafting poetry. I didn't walk away. You pushed me. Every laugh, every prank, every demand. You built this bill. Now pay it. Send. The response came back within 30 seconds, because clearly Clara had been sitting there staring at her phone, waiting for any sign of life from me. You don't mean this. I stared at that message for a long moment, thinking about all the times I'd been told what I did and didn't mean, what I should and shouldn't feel, what I could and couldn't expect from the people who were supposed to care about me. I typed back, "No, Clara. I'm finally calm. That's what scares you." Because that was the truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry or frustrated or hurt or confused. I was just calm, clear, certain. And they had no idea how to deal with a version of me that wasn't constantly scrambling to fix their problems or manage their emotions or subsidize their choices. They'd mistake my silence for weakness for so long that they'd forgotten silence could also be strength. By evening, the tone of my phone's notifications had shifted from guilt-tripping to full-blown panic, like watching a sitcom slowly transform into a disaster movie. The casual manipulation of the morning had given way to the kind of frantic desperation that happens when people realize their safety net wasn't just moved. It was completely removed, set on fire, and the ashes scattered to the wind. I'd spent the day walking around Philadelphia like a tourist in my own life, stopping at Independence Hall, because why the hell not, grabbing a cheesesteak that was probably authentic. Enough to offend someone from South Philly, and generally enjoying the novel experience of making decisions based on what I wanted to do instead of what someone else needed me to fix. But every few hours, my phone would light up with another installment of what I was starting to think of as the Stevens Sisters Panic Symphony. The first movement started around 3 p.m. with Clara. They're threatening foreclosure. Please talk to me. Foreclosure. Now there's a word that cuts through bullshit faster than a chainsaw through butter. See, when you're used to someone else automatically handling the mortgage payments, you tend to forget that houses don't just magically stay in your possession because you're pretty or charming or really good at emotional manipulation. Turns out, banks have this crazy expectation that someone actually has to pay the money that was borrowed to buy the house. Revolutionary concept, I know. What killed me was the please talk to me part. For 8 years, talking had been a one-way street where I listened to their problems, absorbed their complaints, and provided solutions in the form of open checkbooks and strained credit limits. Now suddenly, when the financial consequences were landing on their doorstep like bills collectors with attitude problems, Clara wanted to talk. But Sophie's contribution to the evening's entertainment was even better. Bank froze the account. This isn't funny anymore. This isn't funny anymore. The irony was so thick you could bottle it and sell it as a condiment. When they were setting me up for public humiliation at the train station, everything was hilarious. When I was standing there looking like an idiot while they filmed my confusion for their personal entertainment, the comedy was top tier. But now that their actions had consequences that affected them personally, suddenly the humor had completely evaporated. It's fascinating how quickly people's sense of humor disappears when they become the punchline instead of the audience. When I was the one being pranked, it was all lighthearted family fun. When their credit cards started getting declined at Whole Foods, somehow the situation became deadly serious and completely devoid of comedic value. The bank froze the account. Of course they did. Banks tend to get nervous when joint account holders start systematically removing access and canceling automatic payments. It's almost like financial institutions have policies designed to protect people from exactly the kind of situation that Clara and her sisters had created through years of taking my money for granted. But Mariah's evening contribution was my personal favorite. Kids are hungry. If you don't fix this, you'll regret it. Kids are hungry. Because apparently, in the 8 hours since I'd cut off their financial pipeline, Mariah had somehow lost the ability to feed her own children. Not, I need to figure out how to buy groceries with my own money. But your actions are directly causing children to starve, and if anything happens to them, it's your fault. The emotional manipulation was almost artistic in its shamelessness. She'd taken a situation that was entirely of their own making and transformed it into a scenario where I was somehow the villain for expecting adults to take care of their own responsibilities. The kids were hungry not because their mother had been living beyond her means, but because their uncle had stopped subsidizing her lifestyle choices. And that threat at the end: if you don't fix this, you'll regret it. Regret. Like I was supposed to be terrified of the consequences of, what exactly? Not paying other people's bills. Not solving problems that I didn't create. Not continuing to enable a family of grown women who'd apparently never learned that money has to come from somewhere before you can spend it. I'd been regretting things for years. I'd been regretting every automatic transfer that I'd set up to make their lives easier. I'd been regretting every crisis that I'd solved with my credit card. I'd been regretting every time I'd said yes when I should have said figure it out yourself. But now, sitting in a Philadelphia hotel room eating pizza that I'd ordered with my own money for my own dinner, regret was the last thing I was feeling. I typed slowly, savoring each word like I was crafting the perfect response to years of accumulated bullshit. Regret? I've been regretting marriage to this circus for years. Every laugh, every prank, every demand. You built this bill. Now pay it. The response came back faster than a boomerang in a wind tunnel. Clara, you don't mean this. But I did mean it. For the first time in my adult life, I meant exactly what I was saying without any hidden agenda, subtext, or carefully calculated diplomacy designed to avoid hurt feelings. I meant it with the pure, unfiltered honesty of someone who'd finally stopped trying to manage other people's emotions at the expense of his own sanity. I answered immediately, "No, Clara. I'm finally calm." That's what scares you. Because that was the real truth of the situation. They weren't scared that I was angry. They'd dealt with my anger before by waiting it out, offering half-hearted apologies, and then going right back to their old patterns once they thought I'd cooled down. They weren't worried that I was hurt, because my hurt feelings had never been a barrier to their behavior before. What scared them was that I wasn't emotional at all. I wasn't ranting or raving or threatening or pleading. I wasn't trying to negotiate or compromise or find some middle ground where everyone could feel good about themselves. I was just calm, clear, and completely done with their shit. Calm was dangerous. Calm couldn't be waited out or manipulated away. Calm couldn't be guilt-tripped into submission or bought off with promises of better behavior. Calm was permanent in a way that anger never was, and they could sense that this wasn't the kind of storm that would blow over if they just kept their heads down and waited for me to get tired of being upset. For years, they'd mistaken my silence for weakness, my patience for stupidity, my generosity for obligation. They'd assumed that my reluctance to cause conflict meant I'd never actually stand up for myself when it mattered. They'd built their entire lifestyle around the assumption that I would always be there to catch them when they fell, pay their bills when they overspent, and absorb their bullshit with a smile. But silence can also be strength, and patience can run out. And generosity, it turns out, is actually a choice that can be revoked when it's no longer appreciated. My phone buzzed one more time with a text from Clara. "We need to talk about this like adults." I almost laughed. Now she wanted to talk like adults. After years of treating me like a combination ATM and emotional punching bag, after setting me up for public humiliation as their morning entertainment, after spending the day sending me guilt trips and threats and manipulation disguised as love, now she wanted to have an adult conversation. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and didn't answer. Because sometimes the most adult thing you can do is refuse to engage with people who've proven they don't actually want a conversation. They just want you to go back to being their solution to problems they created. The next morning hit different. You know that feeling when you wake up and for just a split second you forget where you are, but then reality kicks in and you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be? That's what happened when I opened my eyes in that budget hotel room with its questionable carpet and flickering fluorescent lights. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to someone else's crisis. I strolled down to the lobby like I had all the time in the world, because guess what? I actually did. No frantic morning routine dictated by someone else's schedule. No urgent texts demanding immediate attention before I'd even had my first cup of coffee. No mental calculations about whose emergency was going to cost me how much money today. Just me, moving at my own pace, making decisions based on what I wanted to do instead of what someone else needed me to fix. The little cafe attached to the hotel lobby was one of those places that's trying really hard to be trendy, but can't quite escape its corporate hotel origins. Fake exposed brick, Edison bulb lighting, and a chalkboard menu that someone had clearly spent way too much time making look casually artistic. But the barista was a genuine human being who smiled like she actually meant it. And the coffee, real coffee, not the industrial-strength hotel room stuff, was hot and strong and tasted like possibility. "Good morning," she said, and it was. It really was a good morning. Maybe the first genuinely good morning I'd had in months. Not good because nothing bad had happened yet, but good because I was finally the main character in my own life instead of the supporting actor in everyone else's drama. I found a table by the window where I could watch normal people doing normal things, heading to work, walking dogs, living their lives without apparently being responsible for solving the financial and emotional problems of three grown women who'd somehow convinced themselves that adulting was optional as long as they had access to my bank account. The coffee was perfect. Not perfect in an objective sense. It was still hotel lobby cafe coffee, probably from beans that had been sitting in a warehouse for 6 months before being ground by a machine that got cleaned twice a week if the management was feeling ambitious. But it was perfect because it was mine. I'd bought it with my own money, for my own enjoyment, without having to justify the expense to anyone or calculate whether that $3.50 could have been better spent on someone else's urgent needs. My phone was sitting on the table, face down, and for the first time in recent memory, I wasn't feeling that compulsive urge to check it every 30 seconds. The silence was beautiful, not the absence of sound. The cafe had the usual background noise of espresso machines and quiet conversations, and someone's laptop making that annoying notification sound that meant their email was more important than everyone else's peace and quiet. But the absence of obligation, the sweet, perfect silence of not being needed by people who'd confused being needed with being used. Their calls were still coming in. I could feel the phone vibrating against the table like an angry insect trying to escape from a jar. But each buzz sounded smaller somehow, less urgent, like the sound was coming from a parallel universe where people still believed that their emergencies automatically became my responsibilities. I thought about them, probably gathered in my kitchen, well, the kitchen I'd been paying for, having their crisis meeting. Clara pacing back and forth like a caged animal, running her hands through her hair and trying to figure out how to solve problems without access to my credit cards. Sophie sprawling dramatically across the couch, probably live tweeting her suffering to her 7 followers while simultaneously Googling how to pay rent without sugar daddy. Mariah bouncing between righteous indignation and genuine panic as she realized that threats and emotional manipulation only work on people who actually care about your opinion. For years, they'd treated my silence like weakness. Every time I didn't argue back, they thought they'd won. Every time I absorbed their bullshit without fighting back, they assumed it meant I agreed with them. Every time I solved their problems without complaint, they took it as evidence that solving their problems was my job, my purpose, my obligation as the family ATM with legs. But silence can be strength, and patience can run out. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing while other people's poor choices finally catch up with them. I'd spent 8 years being the solution to problems I didn't create, funding lifestyles I couldn't afford, and absorbing abuse from people who claimed to love me. 8 years of being told that my feelings didn't matter, my time wasn't valuable, and my money was community property that existed for their convenience. 8 years of being treated like a supporting character in my own marriage, a walk-on role in my own family, a bit player in the comedy show that was supposed to be my life. But today, sitting in that hotel cafe with my overpriced coffee and my face-down phone, I finally understood something that had taken me way too long to figure out. They hadn't stranded me at that train station. I'd been stranded for years, emotionally and financially, in a relationship that was all give and no take. The train station was just where I finally realized I had the power to leave. The steam from my coffee rose up like incense, like a blessing, like a toast to the man I was becoming instead of the doormat I'd been. I raised the cup to my lips and whispered, just loud enough for my own ears to hear. They thought they stranded me, but I was the one who finally left them behind. And that was the truth. They'd orchestrated their little prank thinking they were teaching me a lesson about being too trusting, too gullible, too willing to believe the best about the people who were supposed to have my back. But what they'd actually done was show me exactly who they really were when they thought no one was keeping score. They were 3 grown women who found joy in my humiliation, who took my support for granted, and who'd built their entire lives around the assumption that I would always be there to clean up their messes, fund their choices, and absorb their abuse with a smile. Well, class was officially dismissed. School was out. The lesson was over, and they were about to discover that the final exam was pass or fail, with no makeups, no extra credit, and no appeals process. My phone buzzed one more time against the table, but I didn't even glance at it. Whatever crisis was unfolding in real time back home could unfold without my immediate intervention. Whatever emergency had suddenly become my responsibility to solve could wait until the end of time for all I cared. I had coffee to finish, a beautiful morning to enjoy, and a whole new life to figure out. For the first time in years, the only person whose problems I needed to solve was myself. And that felt like freedom.